So, how did you get here? Did you get here by pure chance, or mayhaps you find it through my other video first? I may not really expect people to watch it all the way through, even though I would appreciate it, but on the other hand, the story is simply 3 hours long. So, if you really did watch it all from beginning to end,
Congratulations! 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 Congratulations!
but you do know that there are a lot of chapters, so you don't have to do it in one go, do you? Now then, Arcaea is probably not the first game you would think of when talking about story in games. As a rhythm game, its main draw would be high-octane, exhausting and outright insane gameplay. Like, for real, what is that? If you are someone who can do that, and pure nonetheless, please call me, because I need to tell the government that I have found aliens on Earth. But that is what you came here when signing up for a rhythm game, not the 3-hour-long text-based story that has more character development in single parts than some enemies give all the characters combined. And that's just the main story. We still have the side stories that massively expand the world all of this plays in, while also going through 7-ish characters, as 2 of those are about 2 characters. And then there are also 6 more short stories, with every of these 18 stories being simultaneously world building and character development. Loredo really outdid themselves for this completely unnecessary extra, and I only know about Arcaea because of the Switch version's trailer that had been played on some random video I watched, but that was luckily still before the finale, as the finale, oh boy, it did something that would never work on other types of games. And I did do my best to reenact that in the other video, which you should definitely watch right there. But if you weren't there when it happened, you can never really experience how it was meant to anymore. But let's get this boring introduction over with, and spoiler warning, like what, you didn't expect a video like this to have spoilers? Let's start with the unlock requirements, or how you could also call it, the gameplay. It is quite obvious that you need to play the game to play the game, but not everything needs you to just play the game. With the first time of that happening will be the side stories to the main story. For the side stories themselves, it's easy, just do what you did before, just now with Hikari Zero and Tairitsu Axium, which is exactly the point of them. With doing how you have done to get here, all you get is a dead end. You need some change, some anomaly to go further than this point, and how you get to the next part is directly tied to the story. In Hikari's case, you need to seal Hikari Zero, and with sealing away that version of her, when your recall, aka resolve to not give into the light of Arcaea, is high enough, you trigger the anomaly. For Taritsu, on the other hand, it is not you changing anything to prevent her getting a good ending, but the game, aka the world, does it against your will. And also, unlike Hikari, you never reach the end, as you are being forced out of your desired outcome. And that term, anomaly, fitting, isn't it? That's how these songs are called, anomaly songs. And at the same time they represent the anomalies that change the girl's path. How about the other terms of the game? This, you might call it a track, but then why do you get full recalls and pure memories? These words are related to stories after all. On top of that is this specific story about a world of others' memories and girls recalling them. Nah, probably just some weird coincidence. So anomalies may be fun and all, but there's also a third way of unlocking a song, with an equally purely coincidental weird name, a terminus song. I know they did change the original way of unlocking Arcav, but it originally went: you play Pragmatism, the song that ended Hikari's journey of ignorance, you play Fractured Ray, the song that ended her spiraling into oblivion, and then you played Ringed Genesis, the song that ended her meeting with Tairitsu. And then Arcav started playing, the song that ended her attempt of a peaceful resolution. And actually, I lied. After a long time of waiting, we finally got the last story update, and with it we got the last way of unlocking a song. The Axiom of the End brought with it an unlock requirement so tied to the story that it became part of it. But how about we keep that last unlock requirement for a bit later, and let's go over to the story that leads us here, to understand what the axioms do. First of all, let's talk about the world. You can't have a story without taking place somewhere, even if the where can be quite confusing sometimes. But the world of Arcaea seems to just ignore that idea. A world of white, nothing but white, and glass filled with reflections of other worlds, and in the distance ruins from the past, or maybe they had always been ruins. It's just a bland, uninteresting world, and quite on purpose. The Arcaea are meant to be the only focus in this world, not for the reader, but for the girls wandering there. If not, they would not be forced to interact with the Arcaea and the memories they represent. And every girl gets only one type of Arcaea, with Hikari only getting Arcaea that are considered good, and Taritsu only getting those considered bad. Being like that, if the world had anything at all of interest, those two would easily get distracted from their monotone memories. For Hikari it may seem like she would want to interact with them anyways, but if you would stand before a white wall with only one black spot, you would be interested in that part simply because it's different and no other reason. Hikari has all the good memories she could want, but the second she would have something else of interest, it would be far more interesting for her. On the other side is Taritsu, who obviously wouldn't want to endlessly see torment, so I don't really have to explain why she would be focused on anything else if she could. So, that's the setting of the story. Next is the action of the characters. Both start moving, both seeing more of the only thing given to them, and leading ultimately to the only conclusion this could lead to, the irony of it all. It is said that anything in excess is a poison. The truth Hikari either didn't know or she simply did not care for it. Hikari sees nothing but good, and by definition good cannot be disliked, or it would simply not be good. Unlike envy, pain and betrayal, things that can hurt you and that you can physically feel, good is nothing but a contrast to the alternative. But when given only the contrast without reference points, it's nothing but a homogeneous mush. Hikari sees always the same, and because she always sees it, does her brain change it to simple background noise. But because all there is this background noise, nothing is left but void. Hikari dies of apathy towards existence. Taritsu is equal and opposite, however, who gets endlessly hounded by the bad, cannot but choose of two options. Either she gives in and accepts that she has to suffer, or she fights back. The natural response of anyone would of course be to at first fight back, but everyone has their limits. May they be high for Taritsu, the end of the world was the one thing she couldn't fight. As opposite, Hikari's anomaly is the one thing she needed most to prevail. A contrast to what she saw, something that wasn't good or bad, but simply something that was, and that gave her reference, with which she was not only now capable of understanding what was happening. Despite different starting points and different experiences, both had two paths before them that were exactly the same. Absolute good and absolute bad lead to the same conclusion in the end. Ironically, it was Taritsu who was on the path to salvation. Because all she saw was horror, she needed to be strong, while Hikari was on the path of oblivion, because all she knew was bliss, so she never learned to fight back. Something that got corrected with the anomalies. Good has to be salvation, and bad has to be oblivion, the realization that would drive the actions once they meet. But keep in mind, both knew of the alternative, and almost walked that path, so now that they meet, their conflict does not stem from being opposites. She needed to let out her frustration on something alive. She needed someone to be heard. But at the same time, shortly after this, when Taritsu meets Hikari, "Look, you're holding back, even now. That tells me that even after everything you're a very good person. Still, you're strong." But as it had to be, Hikari's actions are inadvertently what triggers their fight. Hikari learns that you need to fight back. Taritsu always knew that. Hikari seeks the good in even the bad. Taritsu needed to do that to move forward. Hikari tells Taritsu that in the end they reach a good result through perseverance. Taritsu gets shown one more time why that isn't true. The glass shows an unmistakable image of herself, run through with a jagged pillar of glass, the wound seeming to sear her clothes and body apart in a glistening, pale, and consuming flame. This is the exact description of this image if you didn't realize, and this is also a self-fulfilling prophecy. Because Taritsu sees the end result of the meeting, she has no reason to fight its outcome. But because she doesn't fight the outcome like she would have done before the path split, is she forcing this outcome to come into existence. So if you know the future, could you change it? Or is you acting differently? Part of what created the future you saw. The beginning of the fight is just a simple display of power. Importantly though, does Taritsu not kill Hikari? She needed someone to be heard. But you could also see it as a kind of justification, as Taritsu sees her own foolish self in Hikari, someone who thinks that things could have a good ending. The Arcaea are their weapons. The only Arcaea Taritsu gets are those of people being heard, so this is all Taritsu can do. In this climaxing fight, we reach the first of 3 tracks you cannot lose when playing first time. The Tempestissimo anomaly isn't as much an anomaly of what is happening, and more one of changing how the story was told to this point. Tracks represent Arcaea. Arcaea represent tellings of old times, but now we no longer recall memories of others. Tempestissimo is the pinnacle of that. Every track before that has its own key line. They are the ones shown when completing the track for Tempestissimos unlocked, showing how both feel in this moment. And once the last emotion has been shown, without warning or break, it immediately goes over into Tempestissimo. Just like in the story, once things have been set into motion, there's no stopping this event. Taritsu attacks relentlessly, and despite all of Hikari's pleas, will she not stop. So you too are not allowed to stop, and simply have to dance along. P.S. You do actually have Hikari Fracture as partner when playing Tempestissimo for the first time, and if the Tempest Taritsu conditions are met, you are able to trigger that anomaly inside this anomaly, while you do have Tempest Gauge reaching 0 does not lose the track in this case, just under these special conditions. You could even say struggling to hit the notes is fitting, as this is just Hikari's struggle to survive. And once Tempestissimo finishes, have you reached the point where Hikari is on the ground, beaten and about to find her end, followed by the one track that you cannot see, unless you find that path to overcome this black fate, within the nothingness of the end. A track that doesn't exist, representing a path that hasn't been made, and with all its wackiness represents Arcaea perfectly the situation. The track slows and speeds up. Time around Hikari stops and starts going on again. And at the end of the track, when you're about to finish, when the world starts moving again, the track, along with the game and along with the certainty of death, only moments away from Hikari's flesh and blood, it just ends. The game resets to the title screen, and the fight resets to an even match, and the axiom of the end opens up. No longer are tracks just related to the story, but now they have become the story. And now that the tempest descends upon Hikari, The end. It is time to retry and clear as the battle begins again, heralded by defection, the first song of the Axiom of the End, followed by infinite strife. The cute may have noticed what I did there. All the conditions to unlock infinite strife neatly packaged into that part, even if I just described what happened in the story. And just how neatly that worked out, you can go through the Axiom of the End almost in one go, just like the story goes on without stopping at this point. Hikari too no longer is trying to stop the fight. But no, not Hikari it is. What the girl garbed in black sees arising from the ground, looking up at her, the thing she is now facing is the true beast. True is a strong word. Taritsu is described acting like a beast, just like the only thing she ever came to know, the vile. Hikari never knew of such things, so the only way to become a beast is not through imitation. The true beast. The next axiom shows it best. How is the song called? If your answer is World Ender, understandable, it's woven onto this cover. And if your answer is Mao, that's equally understandable. After all, that's where the World Ender is woven into. The full picture is that this is Mao Hikari, the World Ender. As something that we will come to know later is that Hikari is a god. On the ashes and ice-covered earth, on her knees, was a girl. The memory played endlessly in her head. The white-haired girl was so powerful that her wish had created a world with meaningless name, Arcaea. And what could be more beastly than a god? Someone able to create this world. This is the kind of place that would break a girl for the audacity of surrounding herself in pleasure and joy. And with not even 4 seconds past did the world ender, with a song at the start of time, create this world, with perfection or imperfection, within which we have seen how the Shapers sundered the world, wield a miracle, with Hikari and Taritsu being able to even affect the very world they walk in. At the start of this fight did Hikari submit to silence, and almost did she let the glass scattered around her submit to entropy, no longer seeking out her desired end, and submit to resignation. There's no control over glass here. Something, anything, an anomaly, a miracle. If something like that appeared, she could make it out, she could step away, she could live. If there was ever a time, it is now and here. But no longer is Hikari waiting to be rescued. She needs to rescue herself. An uneven storm is what this battle now has become. The glass is gathered without balance, and now both sides fight for its control. There's a rising tension now. That control over this fight becomes more difficult. For the one to win this fight to be the one who now had found resolve to lose nothing. A sword created out of good memories, used to kill the girl she wishes she could befriend. Hikari was holding the dying Taritsu. Her action had killed the other girl. It was for her to now contemplate finality. The world was whispering to her that this is how it is supposed to be, but Hikari could not accept it. Retrace your journey, and within it you will find the answer, to wield one extra miracle, to transcend your limits, and achieve something that was beyond her potential. The only step left was to take her hand. That a rhythm game would have a point of no return, that for once actually is a point of no return, as there are no saves to be loaded, and all that happens is permanent, really made this finale much stronger than it otherwise would have been. Normally a point of no return just means what happens there won't affect your game when you come back to it. So having the opposite of whatever happens there is drastically altering your game is a strange feeling. It makes use of something uncanny in video games, the real life, and the story is set up in a way where this could have been the actual end, all Taritsu partners being deleted from your account, as there are plenty of partners with heart gauge to fill their place. Some of this tale remains untold. The truth is, some tales end without ever being fully told, and their pieces, the shards, are what remains, to be put together and understood. I have to say it would have been better if the bad ending is what we have got as finale, instead of that, as that is far more complete, but it is still ambiguous enough as the end as it is supposed to be, so it works, and the effect was still there. If you would pick up the game right now and play through the story, you wouldn't get the same story as someone who played it when it was released. Testify was the last song of the final story update, at least as final as those 3 days of waiting were meant to fool us. Yes, it took only 3 days, but it also took 3 days. Imagine playing any RPG to its end, seeing all the flags for the end of the game, being told it is the end of the game, and then the game ends. There's no reason to believe there would be more, so getting told this is not the end sometime later was a unique experience. It only worked because Arcaea has story not directly tied to its gameplay. Rhythm gains are expected to be updated multiple times, and may they be real, the consequences were negligible with how this game type works. What I should now also mention is the symbolism at the end of Testify. The track breaks, which represents no longer memories but now the story ended with Hikari destroying everything, and so does the gameplay reflect that, by destroying the only thing needed for play. So, what happened after those 3 days? A new story update for the 2 endings that are both equally valid. You may want the good ending to be the end, but unlike the alternative path way back, does this not need an ending that can be continued? And while I'm mentioning it, these 2 endings are simply more extreme versions of the 2 paths Hikari had. One is eternal apathy and the other an uncertain future. But before I go over to the endings, let's go over the last gameplay left. Your choice. You right there, Jeffrey, may have chosen Refuse Fate, but for everyone like you is someone who chose to accept Arcaea. The truth is that both endings are equally valid, because they are both grey ends, and no one can tell what the best end is. If you choose to refuse fate, just like Hikari does, you reach out for Tairitsu, pull her back to open her eyes once more and to be your partner once more. If you ever accept Arcaea, you will get more memories as time passes. Songs will come one after the other, but now that Tairitsu has left and Hikari is fading, do these songs no longer belong to conflict or light side, but are just colorless side, being nothing more than other memories. And after you have read the last part of the story, will the finale instead of text be presented as the last song you hear in the story. Last Eternity, named after the acceptance of Arcaea, and with it an eternal stasis preserving only what once was. And Last Moment, named after the decision that led to the end of the world, just so that this one time the 2 girls can reunite. The lyrics of each being the last part of the story, the one that comes after the credits. Light is shining on the apocalypse in one, while fading away in the other. One wishes in the end, the other curses the world for its eternity. One is ready for every sacrifice, the other has given up hope. Endure and persevere. Accept unhappiness. Grab your wish and never let go. Lament the past. Look out for the future no matter what it may be. Dread your past for all of time. So, this was quite a lot. How about we do a recap, putting all of this into a tight package. As the story evolved, so did the gameplay link. It started as a simplistic play to unlock, go next. The gameplay was no more than a side event to the story, nothing more than background music. But the story changed and so did the gameplay connection. We introduced split paths coming from the same starting point, so the gameplay represented that, by the same track changing what happens. Finally did the track slowly morph into part of the story. It started with the unlock requirements, becoming explanations to the stories, but ultimately making the gameplay and with it the player actively decide how the story would go. For the story, it chose this empty world, so that the outcome would not be muddled in with distractions. The main characters are absolutes, not human beings but concepts, and followed to their expected conclusion, to realize that in the end an absolute is only that. Regardless of which absolute, they will always lead to the same conclusion. One either has to reject the absolute or become void. With that, it's no longer about what path is predestined for them, but what choices they make, as two equal and opposites. It is not out of difference but equality. They can't see the other's choice as valid anymore, having done their choice by rejecting the other option. It trues for Hikari as much as for Taritsu, with Hikari rejecting the idea of the end having fought it, while Taritsu rejects the future having accepted its final conclusion. The fight itself is in reality an extent to their conversation, using actions to speak ideas they couldn't say in words, an equilibrium of unwavering opinions, a lost desire for one being the fate of the other, a realization that fuels antagonism, and a tempest of emotions being expressed the only way they know how to. Not to kill the person but the idea she holds, thwarted by the world fighting its own destruction, through which it inadvertently awakened a god that would have the power to decide the end, representing the power of an almighty being by the one who truly has absolute control over what will happen, choosing to tie in the player self into the storytelling so that it can take Hikari's place and make her final decision. The reason why so many movie adaptations fail is because they disregard the fundamentals of storytelling. If you want to tell the best story you can, you have to use your medium's unique strengths, which rarely translate to other mediums, a task perfectly executed by Arcaea. Not just because of the content of the story, or some moral to pull from it. The characters are only stand-in for concepts and therefore one note. The world is by design bland, but because of how the story is presented, using the unfit medium of rhythm game, using that very unfit being as its strengths, the less fitting something, the stronger will be the impact if it overcomes and succeeds. And so, because Arcaea did not fail facing this hurdle, is it the best story you have never heard of. Come on, now that you have come this far, might as well subscribe. There was clearly something here interesting enough for you to watch a half an hour video. Also, like the video if you liked it, or write a comment of what you didn't like about it. That way I can get better. But for real, this was some effort to do, but I definitely think it had to be done by someone. I really do think this is one of the best executed stories out there. And some nice details at the end for you. If you look at Hikari and Taritsu reunion, you will realize that only Hikari now has black accents, as Taritsu is simply brought back by her like she was in the past. Hikari took into herself the conflict that was no longer bound to Taritsu. Also, alongside Hikari Fatalis, this is the only time Hikari wears no headgear.